Okay.
All right, so I think we can start now with the first of our three speakers tonight. We have Doreen. She's actually my colleague at 1,5, so super excited for her talk on green coding principles.
Thank you.
I want to get rid of this little
I'm Doreen. I'll be talking about green coding principles. Can you get maybe the notes from the only the words? Otherwise,
Is that okay?
I think it's going fine. Okay. I'll work with it. Yeah, as Rachel said, I work at 1,5 as well. We have a slogan that is we want to have everybody live on wind and sunlight forever for free. I'll tell you a bit about how we do that later. What we do is we install solar panels and heat pumps in people's homes, and we also do the energy management. So we're kind of a hardware and a software company, if you want to say. And we're doing lots of interesting stuff, and we're also hiring all kinds of positions, basically. So you could consider us, I think, a climate tech startup in a way. And I work there as an MLOps engineer, so I do lots of data stuff. Currently, not so much machine learning, but we're getting there. Currently, basically building the infrastructure that supports all the data we're pushing from A to B. And today, I want to talk about green coding. So we'll start with like kind of what is green coding, and it's not having coding in the green. It's minimizing the energy consumption of software to limit the potential environmental impact. So our planet is in distress, as most of you probably know, and it's getting quite warm. So in, I think, March, a report was released, they were already at 1.1 degrees. And as you can maybe remember, from like the Paris Agreement, 1.5 was the goal. So we're getting fairly close to that. And it's been getting a bit tight, I would say. So everything that we can do, I mean, some of you might say, yeah, what can coding do? You're maybe right, it's not going to be the biggest influence, but all of us can have an influence, I think, and that's the most important thing I want to say today. Even if you just have a small contribution, you can make one, and all of that is going to save you lots of speed and money as well, so it's going to have more benefits anyway. And so 20 years ago, coding had boundaries, you had restrictions, but today you can run on huge servers and you basically have no limitations anymore. So you can't, like, you don't have to be mindful of the resources that you use, but you still can optimize your code to run efficiently and to use less resources. So kind of that is what green coding and green coding principles are all about. And then I've already tackled the why a bit, but I think it's now or never. Like, either we do something now or maybe we just migrate to Mars or something. That's it. But also more reasons about this. So users and employees are kind of looking out for that, and everybody's looking more for sustainability. And you also, if you're looking for a job, that can be something where you can say, hey, I know some of these principles, and then an employer will say, hey, that's cool, we're kind of a sustainable company, that's important to us as well. Then, like I said, you can send out interviews, you can know some of that stuff. Some of that stuff is helpful in general if you care about sustainability or not. So, because it will save you a lot of costs, especially if you're running a cloud. And you will be faster as well, and you have more performance, more UX, etc. And you have to. So climate lawsuits are on the rise, and they have actually doubled since 2017, which I think is kind of cool. And you might have heard about a couple of them. So in Germany, there was a huge thing where I think it was mainly also Fridays for Futures, but other organizations dragged Germany to the highest court and said, your legislation is not sufficient. You need to update it. And they won, which I think was a major step. You might have also heard about the board of Shell being taken to court, and they've been personally sued. So like persons at the board, persons that were taken to court. This case was lost, unfortunately, but I still think it's kind of cool that cases like that exist. And you might have heard about the Peruvian farmer who's taking, is it RWE in English? RWE?
Yeah.
To court. And I think that's like a really bold move and really cool as well. Okay, now that we've tackled the why, let's get to the how. So I have 8 principles for you on green software engineering. And if you're interested in general, I have more resources in the end, but the Green Software Foundation is really cool and you can learn a lot about it. And I've stole a lot of things that you're seeing from there. These are the principles. So we'll talk about carbon, electricity, networking, stuff like this, and we'll work through them one by one. If you have questions, you can ask in the middle if you want, you can ask in the end, whenever is fine. So principle 1, carbon. We want to build applications that are carbon efficient. That's just a general fun fact. The Earth's temperature does depend on the total amount of carbon in the atmosphere. It doesn't matter how fast we're emitting it. I mean, there's a breaking point, and the more we emit, the faster we get there. But we need to achieve net zero somehow. Like there is enough carbon in the atmosphere already, like a little bit too much actually. So we need to figure out how to not emit anything anymore. So everything that we add, we need to subtract from the atmosphere itself. And how you can do that, or it makes it easier if you stop adding so much or minimize it, so you don't have to subtract as much, which is very cost intensive and very complicated as well. And I think this is a very, this is a graph that shows you very well. You might have seen that already. It's the amount of carbon that we added since the Industrial Revolution, more or less. And it just shows how much we just, in the last 90 minutes, heated up our planet. Heated? Heated? All right. Electricity. We want to build applications that are energy efficient. This has a lot more to do with pre-funding now. So all software, no matter where it runs, needs some electricity. And a lot of the electricity that we use today has still some kind of carbon emitting process in a way. So a lot of electricity is produced by burning fossil fuels, for example. Let's say if you want to plug your laptop into a wind farm, that would not emit as many, but that's not the case. And that's why electricity, if you save electricity, that's still going to be important. You can actually check a lot of the applications. There are lots of sites out there. I just named one website, Carbon, where you can check your website, where you can check different applications to see how much carbon they will be emitting. It is just a proxy, but it's good to know nonetheless, I think. How can you be more electricity efficient? Build small applications. So basically, if your application uses less resources, it will use less energy. So build lightweight applications, use smaller image sizes. You probably don't need a huge image in your app. It will load slower. It will have an impact on the memory of the user's phone. Well, overall, all good. And avoid unnecessary animations, heavy scripts. You probably don't need a fancy loading animation. Just something for no one. Also use native features if you can. Just make your applications as small and efficient as possible. And once you've done that, you can run them in the cloud. And if you run them cloud native, what does it mean? If you take advantage of cloud native features, they scale automatically and kind of are more energy efficient. So for example, it's a bit like if you leave the room, you can turn off the lights. So if you're operating Euro and you run your application or a website, you probably have a lot less traffic at night than you do during the day. So at night, you can definitely scale down. And that's more or less what it's doing. You can scale automatically, and it has other great features as well. And so I checked one website. It happens to be the jobs that one can apply.
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. And it's great. We're hiring.
Compared to our actual website.
Pardon?
Compared to our actual homepage.
Not talking about that. So principle 3, carbon intensity. So how much carbon emissions are produced per kilowatt hour of electricity? Not so complicated. What it means is that electricity doesn't have the same amount of carbon intensity in all places or at all times. So basically, if you have a lot of wind energy, the carbon intensity is going to be lower than if you run on a lot of gas, for example. And by knowing that, you can do a lot of things, or a couple of things. The first thing is, you can run in different zones. So for example, some cloud providers will tell you, this is everything fine?
I don't know. No idea what's happening.
Maybe. I think it is.
No, I see it.
Maybe I just unplug and replug. Nothing. I'll try this one as well.
One question.
Yes.
You showed that website,
Mhm.
with the very good rating of 5.2.
Yeah.
Do you know how many, like what is the median percentage of websites that are scaled that well, or what's the median scale?
It actually says it, I think, on the screenshot.
Oh.
Once we're back, I can show you. There's also, I mean, it's just a proxy, and then
Yeah, I can get this back now.
like depending on which side you go to, it's probably very different. I think from my memory on the screenshot, it says like most of them operate around kind of D, so rather correct. And I think it said like 95% better than most websites. Yeah, but it also really depends which measures you use. By the way, in terms of measures, I heard that 90% of women drop out of tech.
Yeah, there's mixed surveys.
There's
So
very mixed surveys.
yeah. North of 50 for sure.
Yeah.
I think the 50% is like under a certain age.
Definitely.
Are you
Yeah.
checking with the,
That's 18.
if you can come back. The thing is, it shows still that it shows that I still have the screen, but it's just not showing the screen. Maybe present to room only.
More management, more business, more product position.
Hey.
Yeah, yeah, I think.
Also have to share the screen again.
Yes, okay.
Do we have more questions in between? Yeah, perfect.
We good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so regions, you can run on better regions and worse regions, because some countries have a higher carbon intensity than others, also depending on what you consider as green. For example, France has a lot of, what do you say, atomic energy?
Nuclear, yeah.
So if you consider that green, that's very green. And if you don't, then probably not. But it's nice that you can, especially if you run in the cloud, that you can check those things and you can decide, like it makes no sense if you, or it makes no difference if you run in Frankfurt or Belgium, but Belgium might be greener. And
It should work now.
yes, thank you. Okay, the one thing is region, the other is time. So what you can do, not all workloads have to run at a certain time. And that's what we do at 1.5, or that's one of the things we do at 1.5. So it's called demand shifting. So for example, we install heat pumps and solar panels, and then at night, often there's a lot more wind. And then you have a lot more wind energy, and the energy is going to be cheaper too, because wind doesn't cost anything, but gas does. So energy that's produced by gas will always be more expensive than the one from wind. And then I don't know if like you've heard that already at some point, sometimes energy prices can drop to negative. And that's if there's so much energy in the grid, or so much energy being produced that we don't know where to put it, and then we sell it to other, or actually we say to other countries, can you please take it? And we'll give you money for it. And if you actually, there's something like a dynamic tariff for energy, and some providers already offer that. We are starting to offer that very soon. And what it basically means, if you have a smart meter and you have a way to steer your devices, you can say if energy is cheaper and if energy is greener, you can decide to charge your battery then and not now. You can decide to charge your battery and your heat pump at night rather than doing it at peak hours at like 6 p.m. or something when everybody's home. Yeah, I think that was the point I was about to make. And this is kind of a screenshot of, I don't know how many of you use the cloud, but this is a way how you can pick a location and you actually see like GCP, for example, so the Google Cloud Platform says you are in Finland and Belgium and London, apparently, you have a lower CO2 rating than in Washington. Principle 4, embodied carbon. You want to build applications that are hardware efficient. So what it means is don't waste hardware, because all hardware has some embodied carbon basically in it, because you need some electricity, some resources to produce it. So you can kind of say the carbon is trapped into your laptop, your devices. And since we have a habit of buying new stuff all the time, that's not essentially great. So we're developers, and you can do a lot. Like you can try to extend the expiry date of hardware by doing simple things. You can support 1 or 2 versions of a browser more. That might be super annoying, but also might be worth it. You can also, if you build small applications, it will also be easier for all the applications to run it, because probably most of you have bought a new phone at some point because it ran out of memory. And it used to be fine a couple of years ago, but it's not anymore. Hey.
I have to share again. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
And then do the click.
So what you can do personally, but also as a company, is you can buy refurbished hardware. It's not necessarily worse than, and it's refurbished, so people looked at it, it still works fine. You don't need to buy new stuff all the time, especially in companies. Like when people leave, new laptops are going to be bought all the time, and sometimes you can just buy all the laptops, it's fine. Because his memory is terrible. And if you build applications that are more resource efficient, older versions of the hardware will be able to run it. Because the older hardware is not worse, it just struggles with modern workloads. It struggles with the fact that it doesn't have enough memory anymore, it doesn't have enough computing power because it can't run your fancy animation that you have. So it's not worse. And if we build applications again that are less resource or more resource efficient, then old hardware will be more easily able to run that. So think of him. Principle 5, energy proportionality. Maximize the energy efficiency of hardware. So we don't want to waste hardware, and we want to make the most of it. So one reason for running in the cloud is that data centers from cloud providers run more efficiently. Why is that? Because the cloud provider, like Google, they need to pay for the electricity. And if they need more electricity to run the data center, obviously that costs them more, but they don't necessarily get more money. So they can increase their margin just by running more efficiently. And what you can do is you can run your workloads on as few servers as possible. They will also translate in costs. If you run it on smaller servers, on fewer servers, maybe you don't need all of them. Also check how much CPU it needs, how much memory it needs. Maybe you can scale it down. On some cloud providers, you can use half a CPU if you don't need a full one, stuff like that. It will make a difference, it will be cheaper, and it will be nicer as well for the environment. And then something that I mentioned before, use auto-scaling or use scaling in general. It's good for performance reasons, but also you don't need all of that hardware running probably. At some point, you can scale it down. It's nice, cost less. Principle 6, networking. Reduce the amount of data and distance the data must travel across the network. So what does that mean? You want to basically reduce the traffic. There are already very efficient ways to do that, or lots of ideas, because that's something that people have been trying to do in order to load stuff faster, also because we're a globally operating world. So you've probably might have heard of caching. So if you can save stuff on time, like a smartphone, you don't need to refresh and get data all the time. It might be fine for a minute, half an hour, 12 hours. It might not be needed to update that much. CDNs are kind of similar. So if you have something running in Australia, then it might make sense to store the images in Australia as well and distribute it there, rather than sending them from Europe to Australia for every single customer. So that's more or less the idea of a content delivery network. And what you can also do is you can compress data before you transmit it. You might also say, but compressing it also takes energy, but it takes less, especially like depending on how far you send it, obviously. But it is like from just research, it is better to compress it before you send it and then uncompress it rather than sending the just full file. And then on that note, you can use simpler file formats. If you work with data a lot, that makes sense in general, like there are data formats that use a lot more memory, cost less, would be nicer to store. And you can use asynchronous processing, which basically means you have one request or something that comes in, and then you need to wait for something, and you don't need to stand and wait around. You can just also do something else, and then you can come back and say, okay, are you done yet? But I've done a couple of other very interesting and sufficient stuff in between. And if you've heard about the web sustainability guidelines, I've added the link here where you can also just Google web sustainability guidelines. A lot of that is also there. It's nice to read and has a lot of advantages in general. Principle 7 is demand shaping. So build carbon aware application. We had demand shifting before, which is you have the same workload. So let's say you train a machine learning model, but it will always be the same. But you can also sometimes reduce the demand that you have towards kind of the carbon intensity of the grid, for example. Let's say energy is super expensive because it's produced by a lot of gas right now. Maybe at that point, you can't shift your load because you need to do stuff right now. Then you can maybe say, okay, maybe I can scale something down. So you want to shape your demand so it matches the existing supply. stuff like that is already done sometimes. So for example, in video calls, you probably experience sometimes, if your internet connection is not that great, audio will be prioritized over video. And I mean, potentially that you can also do when energy is more expensive. And the same is for smaller video and image files. Also that Spotify does that, I think, automatically as well. If your internet connection is not as great, it will automatically reduce the file size. And I'll hurry up, I'm so sorry. And you can also reduce logs, events, and data. You probably don't need all the data you have. And you can read much more about this in an article that's called Big Data is Dead, which I really liked. It basically makes the point that you probably don't need all the data that you're storing. And you can probably also store a lot less and wouldn't even notice. Principle 8, measurement. So as we know, it's better if you measure stuff than rather just doing stuff in the blind. And you can do it step by step. You don't need to do everything at once. You don't need to be like a carbon-free company. You can do small things and take it step by step. And as I said, measuring carbon is super complex. There are like companies who try to do that, etc. And maybe you don't want to spend money on like their services, but you can. There are a lot of proxies you can use. First one is cost, especially if you run in cloud. If you run more efficient software, it will be cheaper. Same as for networking. So if it's faster, if you send less around, that's going to be better. And you're going to have an increase in performance. The users will love it. So that's going to be great. And here I have a cute measuring dog. So these are the 8 principles. So we went from carbon, so be more carbon aware, uses electricity, be mindful of the hardware, then be also mindful of networking, increase performance, and then shift stuff around, however, wherever you can. These are some of the resources that I really liked. There are lots out there, so Green Coding Berlin is really cool, the Green Software Foundation, the Sustainability Web Manifesto is nice, we mentioned that, and there's a side channel you can join, of course, where lots of really cool people. And if you, I don't know if you have, we still have time for questions.
We can do questions, it will take a minute to change the slides anyway, so that's perfect.
But so you can follow me, you can, I have a podcast where we sometimes talk about these kind of things, so you can follow my podcast. And I've mentioned that we're hiring, so we are a climate tech company that hires a lot of engineers right now as well, and we need all kinds of amazing people on board. Thank you. Just have questions. Have a question?
So if I want to go tomorrow and start doing something, what's the best thing to start?
It depends, I would say. If you write code for like fun projects, you can just make sure that
No more for my job. Let's say I want to make my company's software more.
I would say start with measuring. So I mean, a lot of cloud providers will already show you kind of like what we use, where you can improve. Definitely make sure everything runs as efficiently as possible. That's something that's also a great sell from management, I think, in general, to save stuff on costs and energy and resources. So let's start measuring what you do, how your code performs, where you can save stuff, like save resources. That's where it's like.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you so much. Then I would turn straight over to our next speaker, my ex-colleague, Veronica. Now I think it's Choco. Anyone hear me? Yes. Okay, I'm Veronica Machado. I'm a full stack engineer here at Choco. I joined about in August.
and I'm going to give a talk about the ecological cost of generative AI. And I'm very glad the presentation before was about green coding because I'm going to leverage that to make the presentation go a little bit faster. So this is yeah. So today's agenda, we're gonna give a very, very brief introduction of what generative AI is, and then we're gonna talk about the era of Gen AI. How do we follow and measure the footprint? Then sustainable AI, and finally AI for climate change. I'm gonna use some examples about good usages of generative AI. So before we start, this is not a talk about how generative AI works technically. That could be a whole talk by itself. And I'm definitely not in a position to give a talk about like explaining such complex topic. I just want to give some context because I think it's really useful about what this is. So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that can create or generate content, especially digital content. Think about images, text, audio, anything that can be consumed by a computer. They are built on top of like large statistical models, right? That are trained on datasets. And the bigger the dataset, the more accurate the model is. The models tell the system basically how to predict what kind of data to generate based on previous statistical models. And the model itself will grab the input and map it to something that can be generated. The other thing that we need to kind of keep in mind is that these models' size are measured in parameters, which is kind of like this internal variable state to the model, which helps it generate content that is more or less accurate to what the input was. So a good example of this is ChatGPT. Like I think most of us have used it or at least heard of it, but there's multiple models that I'm going to reference to the talk. Now I'm going to talk about the era of Gen AI. So generative AI is not new. It has been like artificial intelligence in general is not something new. It has been in use since the 50s, but it was very confined to research laboratories. It's been very recently that generative AI just exploded and is now absolutely everywhere. Especially with the release of ChatGPT in 2022, it now feels like you cannot escape generative AI models at all. And I call it like the tech gold rush era because it's just so many different industries, not just technological ones that are jumping into. It's everywhere. Like even your cousin who doesn't know anything about computers is excited about generative AI. And the data kind of supports this, right? So there's been multiple surveys done mostly in the United States because it's easier to get data there about adoption of these kind of models in the workplace. Surprisingly, that marketing and advertising is one of the industries that has more adoption rate for it. Kind of surprising, kind of not, followed by technology. But we're seeing like very big adoption rates for a technology that is basically 2 years old. And it's not just industries that are looking to adopt it, it's also individuals. So we have this very neat chart, which is how consumers adopt different technologies over a period of 4 years. And we can see that in 2007, when smartphones were released, there was an adoption curve that was a little bit upward, right? People didn't know what the smartphones were, so they didn't jump straight into it. But when tablets came in 2010, the adoption curve just went a little bit more higher because people already had a reference, right? Like tablets are just smartphones were bigger. When we see about generative AI, we can see that the adoption rate has just gone up the roof, and it's very surprising because it's a technology that doesn't have any point of reference. We do have personal assistants like Alexa, but it's just not exactly the same. So people are embracing this new technology in ways that are quite surprising. And when asked about how familiar you feel with generative AI or artificial intelligence in general, asking different groups of different demographics in the United States, a lot of people really felt overconfident on their skills of understanding and work with it. Especially the 21% that said they completely understand generative AI. I don't know what true that is, but I'm very glad people are super confident about it. And now the current landscape more or less looks like this, but imagine hundreds more. You need a tool that generates image. You have so many different things to choose with. You can basically choose which company will you use. You want an open source alternative, you want to use Meta, you want to use Adobe, whatever. And it's becoming very difficult to actually separate them, right? Like there's so many different tools. I mean, every day there's just more and more. So there's really not a way to accurately represent how many different generative AI tools there are currently on the market. So with both industries and individuals jumping into this trend, generative AI is getting bigger and more profitable. So this is also an encouragement for people to start using it more and more. This is a very, like, let's start talking about bigger, right, in the literal sense, which is models are just getting bigger in parameter size. Remember when I talk about parameters, which is this internal state, the more parameters a model has, the more data you need to fit to it, and the bigger the model is itself. When Elmo, which was one of the first text processors kind of models that was released in 2018, was unveiled, it had 94 million parameters, which was unheard of. 2 years later, GPT-3 has 175 billion parameters. And this year, GPT-4 has released, and it has 1.7 trillion parameters. So we're talking about an exponential rate of model. Like, models are just doubling in size like every 6 months. And obviously, we are seeing users jump into too. You probably have heard the news that ChatGPT was the first online service that reached 1 million users. It reached it in 5 days. Again, consider there was nothing quite like it before. No one had any idea about it. People just jumped into it. So with all of this, this new technology is looking to add up to $4.4 trillion to the global economy annually. And it's no wonder people are jumping to use it and capitalize it. The problem is we now have like a kind of a picture of the whole situation, which is everyone and their pets is jumping into generative AI and like creating models and trying to make money out of it. How do we actually measure how is this impacting the world? And it's not so easy, short story, but I think we all need to think about something, which is, as mentioned in the previous talk, everything that is online is actually physical. Like, we never think about the physicality of online services, but they do exist. And generative AI is not the most efficient or most ecological friendly of all the types of software we currently have. There's 3 ways of measuring, and they are kind of intertwined. So I'm going to go through each one by separate. The first thing is hardware. And before I go into this, all of this is based on estimations because big companies are not really transparent about their data. They are not publishing papers saying this is how much CO2 emissions we made. So this is mostly done by researchers that are working with models themselves and they are concerned about the environment, and they are doing estimations based on hardware and data center availability and stuff like that. So keep that in mind. The first thing is hardware. We all know that these kind of models, they have such demand, they need such amount of processing power that they need to run these huge hyperscale data centers. We're talking about thousands of servers running at the same time. And all of this needs to run in hardware. Due to the computational complexity of these kind of models, they need to run on graphic processor units, GPU. And GPU, yes, is more efficient to handle big loads of processing data, but they are also way more wasteful than CPUs. 10 to 50 times more energy is consumed by a GPU unit than by a CPU unit. Additionally, these pieces of hardware are built on what we call conflict materials like tungsten and tantalum. They come from places like China and Indonesia, where we don't really have a lot of visibility into the mining and ecological impact that this has. But as demand increases for this kind of hardware, we also know that this is impacting the communities where the materials are extracted. Additionally, we need to, aside from extracting it, we need to manufacture it, process, and transport it. So this is, again, a lot of energy that is currently being wasted just in this. Some researchers estimate that around 50% of all of the footprint of a model is just on the hardware itself. But it's kind of hard to measure because this is, again, a very long chain of events. I mean, we don't really have visibility to end. The second thing is the training. Training models is the most energy wasteful part of it. I don't know, wasteful is the word, but intensive is probably the word I wanted to use. And bigger models need more energy. Like, it just makes sense. You need to give them more data. They need to run through training much more time, and they therefore use more energy. So there is this very neat chart about how much CO2 in tons emissions were calculated for different models, right? This research was done by the AI Index report in Harvard, and they used a paper done by the Bloom model, which is an open source alternative to ChatGPT, and they estimated that ChatGPT 3, again, 10 times smaller than GPT-4, released about 500 tons of CO2 emissions to the air on one training. Models usually go through more than one training before they actually are released to the public. So this is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger as models keep increasing. For comparison, one car in its whole lifetime, including fuel, consumes 10 times less. So with this kind of like tech rush, we're seeing a lot of impact right now in our environment. And it's not just energy, it's also water. There's been some studies done about how much water was used by the GPT-3 during its training, and they did some estimations about 3.5 million liters. Remember, data centers are running thousands of servers. They need some kind of cooling systems. They usually use evaporation towers. And sadly, the data center industry basically only uses drinkable water. 95% of all of the water used in data centers is drinkable. Only 5% is groundwater, recycled water, or sealed water. So this is something that we definitely need to work on. Finally, we have the inference, which is how much energy does a normal question or a normal input-output situation with a generative AI model use. Very basic. There's been, again, this is quite difficult to actually measure because data centers will not let you know, like, this was the amount of energy wasted by your model, because most of these big companies are also running different things in their data centers. But there's been some math done on the whole matter, and they realized that GPT-4 is 10 to 30 times less, like consumes 10 to 30 times more energy than a Google query. So consider that every time you ask something, like ask GPT a question, it will consume the same amount of energy that a TikTok can basically have. And again, going back to the water, same study with the water, ChatGPT consumes about 1 bottle of half a liter of water in a conversation of 20 to 50 questions, basically. So we're talking about processes that are very thirsty, that's like the way of saying it, and they also consume a lot of energy. So now that I have made you all depressed, let's talk about how to make AI sustainable. And a lot of it goes back to green coding practices too, but there's things that we need to consider. On one side, people who are actually working with models, they need to take measures to make it more efficient. And then we also, as consumers, there's things we can do to reduce our impact. Talking about individuals who are working with models in their companies or in their projects, the first thing is choose existing models. There's thousands of models already that have been trained. You don't need to train them. You can just grab something and use it. Tech is like everything can be reused, it can be recyclable. And then if the model does not exactly match your case, then you can fine tuning or prompt training when you basically provide more context about what you specifically wanted to do. And this is way more efficient than just starting from scratch. Then conserve energy. You need to choose techniques when you are actually training models that consume less energy. For example, there's an open source initiative called Tiny Machine Learning, which lets you train generative AI models from microcontrollers and sensors, and this wastes less. This consumes 1,000 times less energy than a GPU unit. So you don't really need to do all of this training in huge, expensive machines. You can find ways of mitigating the footprint. Then choose green. Definitely choose data centers that, at the very least, are looking into renewable energy or zero emissions. So that's a label that is a little bit complicated too. But evaluate the energy sources of your cloud providers. And also think critically. Like, not everything needs generative AI. Just use models when use models only when it really offers a significant value to the business. In general, like, be discerning about when to use it. Just making videos of your cat using generative AI is very funny, but it takes a lot of time and it's also not really good for the environment. And outside of it, making the internet a more trash-filled place, it's also not good for there. Really question wherever the project needs Gen AI, and also include AI activity in your carbon monitoring. Like this is really important. If you are using it, you will notice that you need to know how much energy you are using in these kind of models. The last thing is that we all as consumers need to push back for more transparency. It's a new technology, it's not regulated at all right now. If we as consumers start demanding companies that have these models to be more transparent about how much energy they are using, then we can actually make an impact. Right now, there's simply no pushback because everyone is just jumping into the train without considering how this is going to affect the Earth. And to end the meeting in like a more of a high-end note, I'm going to talk about uses of generative AI that are actually being used to fight climate change. There's a lot of industries, individual organizations who are leveraging the really good potential that generative AI has to fight climate change. And I'm going to give 3 examples. The first one is the government of Kenya is using generative AI alongside crop monitoring to make basically better yields in the area. So they are monitoring for areas, trying to predict where droughts or fires will happen, and then using that data to push back and like basically harvest crops in a more efficient way. This is something that is really, really cool. Then the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, they are using also generative AI to kind of predict and detect incidents with fire more fast, right? So right now, it's very hard to know where fires are going to start, and then it's very hard to know where they are going, but with these kind of models and cameras, they can predict and try to control them easy, like more faster, basically. And the last one is NASA and Google did joint research using generative AI to try to reduce contrails. So if you don't know what contrails is, there are these really white, like thin white lines that planes sometimes leave on the air. Like we probably all have seen them. I learned recently that they are actually quite bad for the environment. They are 35% of all of the carbon emissions of the aviation industry. So there's been a lot of initiatives to try to understand how they get created and also how to reduce them. And in this one, they used generative AI to predict new flight routes, to remove or diminish the amount of contrails that the planes were leaving. And after they did a study on 70 flights, they managed to reduce it by 54%. So this is something that is definitely having a good impact in the world. And that's it. Questions? No questions? Oh, good. Yeah. Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn. We are also hiring if you want to know more about Choco. And we are also using generative AI for good. Reach out and I can answer all of your questions.
Okay, let me just get your slides up.
Fresh the page as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
How's everyone doing? Still with us? Yeah.
Just one more and then
Folks trying to grab a drink. But yeah, I'll try to be quick so we can go into the networking. And that's always fun. So yeah,
Is that okay for you?
that'd be great. Cool.
Oh God, don't want to break anything.
Yeah, first I want to give kudos to Veronica and to Doreen for these amazing presentations that you just both gave. I feel very personally inspired by both of them. So it's quite an honor to get to be the trio, at the end of the trio. And just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Jessica Green, use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior software engineer at a company called Choco, which I'm going to talk about more during this presentation. I'm also a community leader at another community called Pi Ladies Berlin, which if you're new in the community and we're focusing specifically on Python, but with a very similar mission to Women Who Code. We run similar-ish kind of events. So if you're interested, you can also find us on Meetup. And Doreen is also a member of Pi Ladies, so it's a fun place to be. I like coffee, Lego, lots of different things. I also like AI. I also like looking into different aspects of it, including the ethics and the privacy aspects.
And today I'm going to talk about working for a purpose company. So what it kind of like a case study, maybe a little bit to the things that the previous two speakers talked about. So a little bit about my personal experience and a bit about the company that I'm working at. So I'm going to talk about Ecological mission, their values and goals. I'm going to talk about how that has been as an employee, so what that kind of looks like. I'm going to touch at the end a little bit on other ways to apply your skills, although there were already some really great suggestions given. And the small disclaimer here is we're also hiring. So I will be doing a shout out for that, which is cool, right? It's a great time to work in climate tech. So just to give you a little context maybe of why this is something that's important or interesting to me, I'm a career changer. So I've actually only worked in tech for like the past 6 years. I used to be a specialty coffee roaster before I was doing programming. And when I decided to make this career change, I'm self-taught / community taught, so I'm really thankful to the community for that, especially people in this room like Sarah. I knew that change for me also had to be something that was meaningful and aligned with my other values in life. So yeah, there's lots of good reasons to become a programmer, and if many of you are working in tech, you know what I'm talking about. But I also really wanted to make sure the work I was doing was having an impact outside of that. This is because coffee as an industry is one of the industries that is very much affected by climate change. It grows in microclimates in regions of the world that are very affected by the current climate chaos that we're seeing. And it isn't something that we can just take for granted. We'll also even be there looking forwards. So I felt very invested, and when I came across Ecological as a company, I thought that that was something that hopefully you'll also agree with me when I explain it more, really aligned with those values. The other thing is, I don't really believe that we can just wait for climate tech to save us. I really like what Doreen said, and I also really have the kind of same goal in my presentation, that I hope you go away feeling like you can do something. And that we all can do something and it will have impact. But I think also we really have to be mindful of the fact that nothing is going to like swoop in. And while technology is really powerful and can really assist us, it can also do a lot of damage, as Veronica has also talked about. And I think you said, right, the time is now. And I think that's really true, because we see in the IPC reports that they're already saying, like, we're at a crossroads. There is no waiting. If we want to support ourselves in the future, never mind future generations, we really need to start making the changes today. So Ecological, I've mentioned it a few times. Who already knows about Ecological? Okay, almost everyone, so I guess I will just finish. No. Ecological is a search engine, like Google, like DuckDuckGo, like Bing, with the mission of working towards a better planet. So this is why I really align with that. And it's actually been around for quite a while, but it's kind of climate tech startup, but it's actually since 2009. And we celebrate our birthday on Thursday of this week. So very exciting. So one of our core beliefs is that saving the world shouldn't cost the earth, and we really want to look at being able to integrate this positive impact that you and everyone else can have in your everyday actions. So the stuff that you're doing anyway, right? Who searched the internet today? Be honest. Yeah, me too. For coding. So we're all kind of doing that. So why should we be able to do that in a way that has a positive impact on the world around us? Also things like shopping online. And I think, that list is endless, and we can't solve all of them, but I think there's lots of good ways that we can kind of make that impact really a day-to-day activity. So that's things like having the shopping vertical that highlights the sustainable products above all of the other products. So not just giving folks the filter options, yes, giving them the options, but really making that a priority in our products. We just released, well, the rollout is 40% in Germany, so almost everyone here will get it, a chatbot with ecological. So yes, we just had an amazing talk about generative AI with so much amazing insights, specifically also around the sustainability aspects. And we have incorporated chat into our product because we also believe that we can use this as a way to kind of communicate those values around the impact that can be had. And we have two modes. I was going to do a demo and then I thought, oh, 5 demos. And as I mentioned, by the end of the week, it's going to be at 100%. So if you don't go code, you'll probably see this AI chat tab appear. But this little green leaf here, sorry for the online folks, not sure if you can see that, but there you can switch. So if you want to be on a more productive standard mode, you don't want that green layer, you can also make that choice yourself. Like I think a sustainable choice should also be an informed choice. But we have this as an option. So this is, yeah, pretty big and pretty recent news. And we're also doing things like calling out greenwashing again, so that you can make informed choices. So we have these little green leaf for companies that are having company missions towards sustainability goals, and then we have little fossil, little factory symbols that actually shows companies that are fueling the fossil fuel industry. We're also showing different ratings for countries and different ratings for companies. So you really, the similar concept to the website that we looked at, and we talked about like the rating of what does the website have us come. We're providing those, but more at consumer level. So those things are for users and are around like the product that we're building and the kind of ideas that we're having of how we can make those interactions for everybody impactful. But also as a company, I think it's really interesting how Ecosia's approaching things. So we use 100% of our profits, 100%, for the planting. The vast majority is tree planting. So folks that are aware of Ecosia already and might have known us for a while might know us as the search engine that plants trees, because that has been our primary focus, because it's still one of the best ways to have impact. However, we also do things around firefighting and kind of different initiatives working with local communities. How does that work? Essentially, you search the web with our search engine. We generate revenue from adverts, which is actually how pretty much any search engine is doing it, unless it's more of a subscription model. And we use that to fund trees and do these different initiatives. We want to be radically transparent, because you should not just take our word for it. You should not just take anyone's word for it. So we're publishing our financial reports and kind of really being radically transparent there around where the money is going each month. And we're not just producing energy, renewable energy, to power all the searches. Neutral is not enough. We already talked about this in the previous talks. We need to go beyond that. So we are also one of the first carbon negative search engines, which means if you want one thing to do today, you can use Ecological, because it's better than the video in that aspect. So also we heard about like, you know, where we're doing the planting and kind of the impact that it can have in terms of, you could just go out and seed bomb out in Tempelhof and grow a bunch of trees there, but it probably wouldn't have the same impact as if you are more mindful about where this is happening. So we actually have a whole team dedicated to tree planting, which is the tiny tip of the iceberg for who actually does all of this work, because we're working with partners on the ground. So it's really important to work with people and communities who know the most about this, which is people in the locations where the tree planting is taking place. And also make it something for them that they can also profit from, so that they're incentivized to continue ensuring that the trees also stay in the ground. So this is a picture of one of our projects, and you can go on a lot of all the different projects that we have. This is in Burkina Faso. And this, I wanted wanted to show this picture because I think it shows a good variation of like what tree planting might look like, because there's like almost no trees in that picture. But this is kind of like the work that we have to go in and do. So a lot of the time it's about climbing back deserts, and it's about really having a good understanding of the land in those locations and how we can do effective tree planting. So I talked so far kind of about what our product is doing and what the company aspect is, and now I'd like to talk a little bit about how that experience then works as being a developer, because while I am looking to go to one of the tree planting projects, my day-to-day job is not planting trees, in case that wasn't already clear. And I think it's an interesting thing when you think about what is the difference to working at a purpose-led company versus maybe working at any other tech startup. So one of the first things is that our company is a part of Purpose Foundation, which means that the founder and CEO has signed off any right to be able to take money out of the company. We don't have any investors, and this kind of means that it's a steward-owned company, excuse me, meaning that it's kind of, when it comes to decision making, a lot of the drivers for those decisions come from different places. Our profit is our trees. So often when you're making that decision about which database instance you're going to choose, this is where you're doing that calculation, which makes it interesting, I have to say, because there's a lot of passionate people work at this company, and a lot of us are really in there thinking about how we can improve our products, but also how we can improve our coding standards. And often what it comes down to is, where could this money go for the most impact? Which is kind of nice over how much money are we going to make for our investors at the end of the year. Also, we saw in the previous talks, I think we're amazing around like kind of calculating and having metrics. And I think metrics and measuring things are a really good way to gain understanding and also see progress. And this is something that we're also doing. So we have tech KPIs around carbon footprints, for example, to see like where our emission is. I think this is anyway a really good practice to have as part of design thinking. So it kind of is a little bit different, just the mindset, I would say, of when you're trying to do decision making, what is driving your decisions. And for me, the thing is, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also around compliance. And I think you also already touched on this with the coding principles, and we'll also see, I'm sure, regulation and transparency more in the field of AI, at the very least, I hope. And I think this is the thing, is that it's not just about, oh, well, it's nice and it's saving us money, but there's lots of other benefits as well. Like one of the things around a lot of the green coding principles is that also really benefiting the accessibility of your website. So you're actually allowing not just more people with lower end devices is also a really good point there, but even just being able to interact with your content. And also things like better CEO, and kind of just thinking about it in one, it's intersectional, like I think that's what I want to say, and the words are failing me slightly there, but it's not just like one thing that should drive this. Also, I think touched upon by Veronica is that, we're not just talking about tech in our hands, we're talking about where the tech comes from, and this embodied emissions around hardware and about the minerals that need to be collected to be able to make all of these things for us. E-waste in general, which is like switching out the phones, switching out the laptops every time something comes in, doesn't just impact this climate discussion that we're having, but it also is impacting real human beings who are doing all of this work. And normally, I think Veronica, you pointed out, under circumstances that we don't have full knowledge around, and what we do know isn't good. So, if that's the tip of the iceberg, it's like not a very clear picture. So for me, one of the big takeaways here is diversity is key. We need more people involved in this. We also talked about women leaving the industry earlier, and I think this is like a really key point for me. I do not think that the climate discussions should be led by any specific one homogeneous group. It will not work that way. It does not work that way. We see that when we look at the governmental discussions, and it's the same for tech. We need solutions from all parts of our society who are thinking in different ways to come up with innovation for driving actual meaningful change that is also accessible to people. Because it's really nice to talk about how, you know, maybe you can fly less, or maybe you don't need a car because you live in Berlin, you love your bike, but this isn't possible for everyone. So I really think diversity is key, and that's why I really want to push everyone or encourage everyone in the room. If you're thinking about going into this field, do it. Your voice is really valuable and it's really needed because there isn't enough of us working in the field yet. So things you could do. Consider your own carbon footprint, especially when it comes to the digital waste, and provider choices, which Doreen already touched on. Switch to Choco. If you get very stuck with the results, you can actually use #G at the end or at the start of your search query, and it will redirect you to Google for that search, which means you can keep Choco as your default, but you can still get the results for that specific search. Advocate for sustainable software practices where you work. So, of course, not everyone here is maybe looking for a new job today, but I think there's plenty, especially from the previous two talks, that you can hopefully take away with you. Things could be like, really think wide and broad. So, for example, having like sustainable lunches within the company, and having the conversation around different eating habits that might be more sustainable. One year we came up with recipes that were all from trees, which was rather fun. So it doesn't have to be just about your programming. It can also be about suggesting maybe a toilet paper provider that is better than the one that we currently in the office. And join local climate initiatives. So we actually have a policy that we can use work time to be at climate demonstrations. In fact, we went to one together in Hamburg, and this is a previous one in Berlin. So this is something you can advocate for if you're in a position of management, and you can empower your employees to also join this conversation. I think it's really cool. Really impactful. And there's lots of open source projects. So I think you mentioned some great projects, Veronica, that I actually was not aware of, and I'm really curious to check them out. I am aware of quite a few open science projects, and I think that's something as technologists we can get more involved in than we think. For me, science is something that I find intimidating because I don't have a traditional background. I don't have a PhD. Or even any kind of study in the science, but actually you can do a lot more, I think, than we give ourselves credit for. So I've started to contribute to open source software that supports open science, and be in those spaces more and take space there too. So I would encourage you to do the same. I think open science is really key for innovation. And it's something that we, you know, like by sharing data, methods, and results, we can really emulate a lot of the positive change that we want to see in a more transparent way. OpenAI, who are actually not super open in the sense of transparency. For example, I'm sure we'll have a lot of competition from the open source models, which are gaining more and more momentum in terms of the capacity to be in line with these models. And that is because the vast amount of people who are working on them, and also the diversity of folks who are contributing. I also wanted to mention climate change AI. I'm not sure if someone mentioned it already, but it's a very interesting project. They have lots of lessons. They will help you learn machine learning or data science if you're interested in this. They also have lots of projects that are around things similar to what Veronica was mentioning. There are lots of projects that look at efficiency of systems or look at natural inhabitants and how we can make predictions using this technology to actually have a positive impact on the climate discussion with machine learning and AI technologies. Climate action tech definitely was mentioned, Doreen, thank you. But I will mention them again because I think they're a great initiative and there's so much that I've learned on their Slack channel. And the Green Web Foundation that is very tied to this group really provide a lot of content as well. And I know you're all waiting for it. My hiring pitch, because I've already talked to it so far, so I didn't want to be left out. We are hiring. We currently only have an engineering management role on the website. But the QR code goes to this page, and we will be adding more roles specifically for my team. This role is also actually for my team. So the other roles that will be added will be machine learning engineers. So we don't have very like kind of exact job roles, I would say. Like this is also kind of my role, but at the end of the day, I just call myself a software engineer. But if you're interested to know more, please talk to me because I would love to have some amazing people from Women Who Code join the team. And with that, I would say let's keep the conversation going. I'm sorry if I went over a little bit, but I think now it's time for working.
Right. Are there any questions for Jessica? Yep.
One, it goes way back to the beginning, when you talk about products, and how you rank or display products and give them a green leaf, or how you evaluate various organizations for greenwashing. Like, what is the underlying data that you use to evaluate that?
Great question. Thank you for asking. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really good question. Data is really hard in this field. So we have been working with Net Zero Tracker, which you can, if you're not familiar with, you can look up online, and they have various information for the countries and for companies. I will say, like, that I think this is one of the really interesting areas. So for the shopping vertical, which was on the slide before slide before this. There we go. For this one, we actually worked with 2 university partners to be able to scrape and evaluate data. So I think Veronica had mentioned about labels, and like sometimes labels, and this is also very true in coffee actually, can be a little misleading, right? Like everything could be sustainable in maybe some way. But what we actually are doing with these top line results is we are running evaluation on different aspects of their sustainability. So it actually also looks at things like the life cycle. So like how long that product will last and how that product can be disposed of. So like it's nice if you have a product that isn't going to take thousands of years to disintegrate after you've just stopped using it. And we like worked with like professionals in this field to kind of be able to do those calculations. Does it answer your question? You're welcome.
If there's no other questions, then there is. Go ahead.
Because you mentioned like 6 years ago that you were in a different line of work, and I'm just wondering how you kind of transitioned into now kind of working at Ecological and what.
Thank you for your question. And I forgot to repeat the other question, so I will repeat the question though for the people on the call. So the question was, because I mentioned I had career change into this, and it was kind of how I went around that process and what happened in between me, I guess, leaving the previous work and getting my job at Choco. I was very supported by the German government First of all, I am not from Germany, as you maybe can tell from the accent. I'm from the UK, and I was like really blown away by the support that I was able to get here. To be honest, I mean, I know I pay my taxes, so I know I paid for it, but at the same time, I wouldn't take it for granted. So that allowed me time. And as I mentioned earlier on, I consider myself self/community tour. So I didn't do any boot camp. It was just before the boot camps like really took off here in Berlin. I know there's a number of them, and I know this is a very common track for people, and even the Arbeitsamt will support people doing this. But I didn't do that. I did mainly a lot of things online. And then I joined various communities. Women of Code was one of them. Hi Ladies was probably the most prominent one. And through that, met people and kind of tried to figure out if this was even what I wanted, to be quite honest, because I had always considered myself to be someone who would not sit at a desk for most of the working day. And when I kind of had in mind, okay, yes, I want to do this, I'm going to go for it, I just looked for everything I could find. Because I had this luxury of not working because of the support from the government, I was really able to kind of like immerse myself and like sign up for basically everything. I have not got over that problem, and I tend to oversubscribe myself. I don't know if anyone else has that. Oversubscription anonymous here. But yeah, I did a thing. I got into a program that was called Rails Girls Summer of Code, which was a 3-month internship where I was paid to work on open source. Sadly, this doesn't exist anymore, but there are other similar programs such as Outreachy. And this was a great way because I think there's so much learning. I'm not sure where you are at your stage or if you're already ahead of me, maybe. But like, I think there's only so much that you can learn by yourself. And a lot of the job, what I've discovered is really around working with other people. I don't know why that was surprising to me, but I guess it was. And I think like being in a team and getting that first foot in the door was really, really important. So I do say that to folks a lot. I got the job at Ecosia through a community event. So it was something similar to this. And I wouldn't say I got it through the community event, but I became aware of them through the community event. And was able to meet employees. So I think Oscar, you already raised your hand earlier and said that you work at Choco and that people can come talk to you. So if you're someone else in the room who wants to go on that journey, do that. This is a great opportunity. This is why the community events happen in companies. They also want to hire you, right? It's mutually benefit. And I think I learned a lot on the job. But the last thing I'll say on it is I also brought a bunch of skills that have been really valuable, not only to myself, but to the team I work in, from having previous experience outside of tech. And I think it's something like, I mean, as I do a review today, so I had to like do the job of selling myself, and we all know how awesome and fun that is. But I think I've been able to do well because of those skills. So like if you, like me, have a non-traditional background, and even if you have more traditional background, really think further than just the hardcore coding skills, right? Like, of course, you need to code to do the job, but you can learn a lot of that, and you can learn a lot of it on the job as well. So I was lucky, definitely, that I also came to a culture at a time where they were open to providing the opportunity for me. But I think it's also what you make of the opportunity. You're welcome.
Well, that was a really great end to the talks. Thank you so much again to all three of you. These were incredibly informative and inspiring. So thank you so much for putting in all the energy and preparation for today. Now we move to the networking part, so we can all talk to each other. Yeah, please do take advantage of this. We also have vegan food available for you to eat, so take advantage of that again, provided by Choco. And yeah, I'm not sure how long we can stay, but Stay until we get kicked out. Let's go with that. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I will leave a little, the QR code for the Slack channel up there. If you want to join that, that's probably where we'll share the slides. And also, if you want to share any feedback for this event, anything you'd like to see in the future, please do reach out. And Doreen wants to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to Rachel and Women Who Code to host these events, because I think they're very valuable, they're super important, and thank you for putting in the work. I know like community work is always kind of tedious sometimes, and I think it's so amazing that you foster these communities. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll say goodbye to the Zoom call. They can't join this part. Okay. All right, thank you so much, everyone joining on the Zoom call. I'm going to close the meeting now. But yeah, I hope to see you at an event soon. Thank you so much. See you. Bye.
You mentioned what you will share the Slack channel, right?
Yes, I'll get it up right now.
Will it be also shared via email or for the